Now, today we're going to look back over 2021 at what the astrological signs suggested and what actually happened.
Angel Heart Radio programs should not be used to replace your legal or medical advice, nor your own sound judgment. Welcome to Angel Heart Radio, where we inspire you to remember your magnificence. Join the conversation on our live streams. Head on over to Angel Heart Radio on Facebook. And there's even more for you on angellight777.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Angel Heart Radio. I'm Annette McCoy, and with me today, as always at the start of the month, is Janet Hickox. Welcome, Janet.
Hello, Annette. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's always a thrill. Why not come across and watch via Angel Heart Radio Facebook page? That's where you can ask questions. That's where you can make comments. Janet, it is always so important, isn't it, that we listen to ourselves. We listen to what our own heart is saying.
Absolutely. You're your own best friend.
And sometimes we tend to forget that, don't we?
I think it's really easy to forget that and start bashing ourselves or, doing that self-talk that undermines our self-worth. And yes, we can't expect others to treat us respectfully if we don't even treat ourselves respectfully.
Yes, a very timely reminder. Now, today we're going to look back over 2021 at what the astrological signs suggested and what actually happened.
We have a lot of things that we could talk about, a lot of directions that we could go in today. And some of them, are aspects that we talked about at the beginning of the year that are the things that we were predicting, if you will, like the Saturn square Uranus. We knew that was going to happen. And we knew that was going to create some upheavals in our culture or in our societies. And of course, driven quite likely by COVID and the various forms of that virus and the various responses that we had around the world to mask mandates, from mask mandates to shutdowns to all kinds of, shots or no shots or all of that good stuff. And that dynamic, of course, is still in play, right? We've had it all year long, and it continues even now and into early 2022. And then there were things, that happened that I think that we just didn't anticipate, at least personally, that I didn't anticipate happening. And I think that's part of the magic in astrology, right? We never know, except in retrospect, exactly what that transit was pointing to. But prospectively, we have an inkling, if you will, about what the dynamics are going to be. And so we're looking today at, what some of the things are that how some of those transits affected us globally, or shall we say culturally. And how does that then take us into 2022? Like, what's the continuation of the subject?
Right. Yes, because life goes on, doesn't it?
Oh, buddy, oh, but yes, it does. Life goes on. And the astrology transits, every year has its themes, the themes that we can pick out. Like I usually like to pick out words, that are going to be the themes. And then I like to see how are the transits going to play with those words, the meanings of the words. Is it going to give new meaning to the words? So in that respect, I think, 2021 played out pretty close to what I was expecting. And some of that had to do with very much future orientation. And how is it that we as people on a planet that has finite resources, how are we going to become more able to keep the supply going, right? To be able to be, the word is totally escaping my brain, sustainable. How are we going to create? I've had a week, I'm telling you. Yesterday, I thought I was getting, or was it yesterday? Yesterday was Tuesday. Yeah, yesterday, I thought I was getting senile. I mean, I literally, I told my counselor that I talked to because of a grief counselor. I was telling her, I don't know if it's the emotional stuff that I've been going through, or am I just getting old? Because it seemed like yesterday I was in 50 different directions. And today was better.
Good. You've come through a big weekend, though. You've just had Thanksgiving.
We did. We just had Thanksgiving, and we actually had our family Thanksgiving the Sunday before.
Right.
And then a couple of us in the family, we went to my son's house over in the San Juan Islands and spent Thanksgiving. Terry and I stayed Thanksgiving through Saturday and came home later Saturday and just kind of chilled. It was kind of fun. We had one day where it didn't rain.
Blessings.
So we got to go out in the sun. We got to go to the beach. We got to, just do some, fun things. It was nice to get away, right? A good way to be thankful, even in the midst of our sadness at losing a member of our family. And so, yeah, it was good. It was a good way to sort of end, I think, Thanksgiving or the end of November and be able to turn the tide now, because now, of course, our focus becomes what happens next, right? This is the month where we start to slide into the new year. And we start to be able to see things in the context of the entire year. And of course, 2021 began, I think I said this many times last year, really 2021 began on the winter solstice of 2020, when Jupiter and Saturn came into a conjunction at 0 degrees of Aquarius, an air sign, and changed up a dynamic that had been in play for over 200 years, meaning that we were moving out of an age of earth signs and into an age where air was going to be the dominant society energy. So Jupiter and Saturn are planets that we consider to be more of the societal planets. They kind of hold space between the inner planets and the true outer planets from Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And so they kind of form that bridge between the individual and the collective. So it really always plays out in our culture or in our societies, in our communities. So we get a little bit of a different picture from Jupiter and Saturn, but it always sets the tone for the issues that we might be dynamically engaged with as time goes on. And they only conjunct once every 20 years. So it sets off a 20-year cycle. And so last December, we had a 20-year cycle take off, but it was also the ending of the Earth conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn. And I think it was something like 800 years since we had a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So there was a lot of monumental firsts kind of happening last December, setting the tone for, the whole of 2021. Now, just because that happened on a day, it doesn't mean that, we're done with that, right? We're still working with that conjunction and all that it brought to us. One of the biggest instances, I think, that I don't even think I intuited this one, was the dynamic that was going to take place between the individual and the group, right? That dynamic. I knew that dynamic could possibly be there because Aquarian energy is all about the community or the group. Mind, or how we take care of one another, brotherhood, sisterhood, that group think, right? And what's good for the group. And then I don't think what I thought about that wasn't how that dynamic was going to be a tug of war, how it was going to show up as a tug of war between the needs of the one, my own personal freedom, my own personal rights, etc., versus the rights and the freedom of the group. That turned out to be a huge dynamic that's setting the stage, I think, for, these next 19 years now. It's almost been a year now, right? It's December 1st
Yes.
today.
Mm.
So that became a huge dynamic. And I think it's very fitting for us to see ourselves in that context, especially because we're moving to, or already in, depending on who you talk to, the age of Aquarius, where those themes of the group play out very powerfully. Networking, right? Networks of people, and how do we work together to come to a decision that's good for the most number of people, right? There's that. And I think I did say this one time during one of our shows, is that the coronavirus has really given us the first salvo in that dynamic, because what we see all the time now is, people fretting about getting a vaccine and juxtaposing that against their right to not have that vaccine versus the rights of the rest of us to have people that are healthy around us. And it's just been interesting to watch that play out.
Yes.
Right. And how will we find solutions, right? It's not, the high side of this Aquarian energy that we opened ourselves to in 2021 isn't so much about the focus of the problem. And I think that's been the problem. We've been focused on the problem.
Yeah.
But how do we focus on solutions, things that are going to be able to help us do the best for everyone, as many people as possible, but without trampling everybody else's personal rights? And what are we willing to give up as far as personal rights to be able to support a healthy group? Does that make sense?
Well, it does. And here in Australia, I've noticed there's lots of community groups. People are forming new tribes, if you like. And yes, whilst sadly there can be divisions in families, that's encouraging people to reach out to new tribes. So I do believe that there's this building of new communities, of new awarenesses of the fact that, yes, there are lots of people hurting out there for lots of different reasons. And how can we support each other?
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, one of the bigger things that I think is happening and will continue to happen is the undermining of big politics and big parties, big institutions, big, like, I really note with Aquarian energy the potential for grassroots movements, right? So we saw the power of the Black Lives Matter. We see the power of the what was the women's movement, hashtag Me Too, the Me Too movement. We even saw years back, but almost as a harbinger, the power of the Occupy movements, right? The big changes that were going on. And I think as we move forward, we take this idea that a group of people with a common interest can come together and force, or I don't even want to use the word force, but create a pathway to major change, positive change. As people see the power that they have in their own voices, or in their use of dollars, or in their coming together for a common purpose. And I think in that case, we start to create and release hierarchy in favor of, like, a synarchy, where we are all working together in an equal sort of footing. That does not bode well for big political parties. It doesn't bode well for big, interest groups, because the power's in the people. And that, I think, gets bigger and louder as we move on into this 20-year period of time of Jupiter and Saturn coming together, all starting right here at 2021.
Right.
And then, of course, we had, the antics of Saturn square Uranus thrown in. Antics, but they are salvos that they're tossing at one another. The tug of war between the traditional and the way things have always been, and what's new and what's possible, and revolutionary energy. So we've got this hot revolutionary energy in a square or in a challenge to more of the cooler, more traditional conservative energies. So throw that dynamic into the mix, and you have the recipe for a lot of the different blow-ups and problems that we had in 2021.
Right.
All problems that we have to come at in a new way, right? We can't solve them from the same level that we created them from in the time of Earth, which was really about using up our resources unwisely, right?
Yes.
Was about greed and capitalism and buy and create products that are going to bust down pretty soon so that people would have to buy more, and none of that was sustainable. And as we moved into 2021, that was one of the key words: sustainability.
It's going to stay.
Preserving.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's not going away either, right? It's morphing a bit. And Saturn square Uranus showed us where we were all out of sorts in that kind of way. And then if I had to pick a third thing for 2021, it was the T-squares that we had. In T-squares are a challenging aspect pattern of planets that come together. There's two of the planets that are in opposition to one another, and both of those planets are in a square or a challenge aspect to another planet. We had Mars, Saturn, and Uranus, where Mars was at the focal point, meaning that Saturn and Uranus were squaring one another, right? And Mars was taking up the position at the opposite. And then we had Venus filled it in, right after that. And that happened in June and July. And the fact that Mars and Venus were involved in each one of those T-squares. So when you say T-square, you think challenge, and the challenge gets to be sort of released, if you will, through the planet at the apex point. And the apex planet was Uranus. So the bang for our buck was coming in when we moved more non-traditional thinking outside of the box, becoming more solutions oriented rather than problem focused. And I think that added to the distress, if you will, of the summer. And certainly, new variants of COVID didn't help matters, political issues and fallout from, everything that was going on in the different countries around the world didn't help. So all in all, 2021 was exceedingly challenging
Indeed.
in ways that I don't think we anticipated even walking into the year.
No, I certainly didn't. I honestly thought, I could accept 2020. Okay. Well, it's over now. Let's get on with it. And all of a sudden, it was almost a repeat, and in some ways harder to accept that's me personally. I'd like to welcome Tom Wright. Hello, hello, hello. And Belinda Clayton. Welcome to the show. If people have questions, please write them in the chat, especially if you've joined us on Angel Heart Radio Facebook page. You're able to do that quite freely.
Yay. Nice to see you, Tom and Belinda. Welcome.
Yes.
And also, by the way, welcome to Palindrome Days. I don't know, it probably doesn't work on your end because you guys use the day first and then the month, correct?
That's right.
In writing a date, but we do it the other way. So it's month, day, year. And today is 12/1/21. And if you turn that backwards, it's also 12/1/21. And for the next 9 days, we have that. We have that going on.
Oh, yes. How interesting.
Yeah. Also on the 11th and the 22nd, right? Just using master numbers then in between the two 12s, or the 12 and the 21 turned around, same thing.
Fascinating. Now, Beth has joined us too. How lovely to see you there, Beth, another presenter on Angel Heart Radio. Beth has a show on Mondays, fortnightly here in Australia. So that would be Sunday night for you over in the gorgeous USA, Janet.
Nice. And what is her show about?
Well, like mine, it tends to differ from show to show. Nice. Something that to help us think and expand our thinking So
Good.
she's watching and Anaya's watching in Brisbane.
Hi,
Hello,
Anea.
Anaya.
Hello, Tibeth. I actually saw Tibeth. How did this happen? Anea sent me something like a link for today's show, right? So that I could share it.
Yes.
And I followed the link to see where it went so that I could share it. Only it took me to Tibeth's show, or she must have been live at the time. Because that would have been Sunday, and this was yesterday. I think I was looking for this, so I actually got to see her, and I listened to her for a few minutes before I went on. So,
well, there you go. That's incredible, isn't it? All synchronistic.
Synchronicities.
To Beth is saying she does talk about all sorts of things. And like us, she certainly lets people who follow Angel Heart Radio Facebook page, she always puts out what her show is about. So, and of course, the beauty of all of these shows, Janet, is that people can watch the videos once they've been created, because it's not always convenient to watch while we're live.
Right.
And while we're talking about shows, you provide a show Mondays and Fridays in the US, which equates to Tuesday and Saturday here in Australia, where you talk astrologically.
You're right, astro design. So currently on Mondays and Fridays, we're talking about human design, the gene keys, astrology, star seeds astrology, which is a new one that I'm just starting to introduce to my community. And I shouldn't be saying this because I haven't decided for sure if I'm going to do this or not, but it looks like for 2022, I might be adding a Wednesday show that may or may not have anything to do with astrology. It might be purely interviewing interesting people. It seems to be aligning for me to do that. Whether I can hold that true, maybe it'll just be one Wednesday a month, I don't know, but it seems like I'm getting people that want me to interview them on my show. So that would mean adding another day, because I don't want to take away from the astrology stuff, but I don't want to short shrift somebody that has something interesting to talk about either. So, So some changes coming up in my own show, and that always seems to happen right about now, doesn't it? Right? We get a glimpse of what might be coming for the next year.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And speaking of that, I've got a lot to talk about for 2022. We don't have the time today to talk about all of that. So I put together a webinar that will be all about the astrology of 2022, probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how many questions people have at the end of that. And it's $25 US. It'll be on the 14th of December at 12 p.m. my West Coast Pacific time.
Right.
And I don't know what time that puts it in Australia, but it is recorded. So again, like anybody else that can't watch this show at the time it's live, you will be able to get that and the slides and all of the questions and answers. So we'll be diving deep into 2022 and looking at all of the various things that are happening. But today I thought we could talk about maybe some of the highlights, right? The things that are taking us over the bridge from 2021 into 2022.
Lovely, Janet. A little glimpse into 2022.
Yeah, a little sneak peek. Now, as I look at 2022, I've been listening to, and I don't usually do this, I don't usually like to get imprinted by what other people talk about in terms of the year. So I was really trying to formulate my own thought processes of the year before I heard anybody else's. And I heard a lot of, after I formulated my own ideas, I heard a lot of more negative thoughts about 2022 than I had been thinking about or looking at. So I'm going to say that likely we're going to come down somewhere in the middle of, my more forward-looking positive view and the more negative view that other astrologers have. So we're going to come down in the middle. But
good for you.
I wish it was all going to be Pollyanna good stuff. I really do. And there's always the potential. Right? There's always the hope that, and hope, what a huge, huge theme that we get to start the new year with, right? Hope. As
Yes.
one of the first things that we get to come into contact with actually begins December 29th. So the end of this year, and as we walk into 2022, and that is Jupiter's placement in our human design charts at a gate, the 55, which is about blessedly releasing us from victimization and moving us toward freedom. Now, that could be greeted by people in a lot of different ways, right? It can be greeted with, I just want to be in my victim pity party martyr shoes, right? I don't need to get rid of that. I just need to know that I can blame, shame, or guilt trip somebody else for all the things that are happening on the planet or happening in my personal life. But on the other hand, the high side is that we have a planet that's known for its optimism, for its ability to see the broader picture or the bigger perspective, and it sitting in a dynamic place of our being able to see ourselves free of all of that old victim story stuff. I was going back to all the things that I wrote about for January, and everything was about a story. The story we're telling each other about our lives, the story that we tell collectively about what's happened in the past, about what's happening now, about what's happening in the future. And the really interesting thing is that we all have the choice of the story, right? How do we want to tell the story? Do we want to tell it from the victim standpoint, which we could, right?
Yes.
I certainly could tell a victim story about my year, but is that serving me? Is that serving anybody in any positive way? And I would have to say, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. It just keeps you tied to old thinking or to old patterns. So our first blessing, if you will, that we get as we move into 2022 is the choice that we have. Do we want to have faith that we are living in times that are leading us to a brighter future, and that all we have to do is make the choices to live in that brighter future? Or do we want to stay chained to the victim martyr scenario, which has been humanity's history, right, or the last couple of thousand years? I say we choose to release ourselves, to untie all those chains, let go of them, stop being the victim, stop subscribing to conspiracy theories about how, they're out to get us, they're out to kill us, they're out to, do things to us, and start living from what your heart is telling you. Like, this is what I want to create. This is how I want to move forward. And it doesn't mean that there aren't things happening out there that we should be watchful for. So before everybody starts screaming at me about, there's people out there, be aware, but don't live it. Don't empower it, right? What we want to empower is the freedom story, right? And freedom encompasses a lot of things, right? When you're free from being a victim, what you have is the power of choice, right? The power that to move forward, to leapfrog in some very big ways. So that's the very first dynamic that we hit up. Interesting that it's Jupiter again, right? Jupiter. Last year was Jupiter and Saturn. Saturn doesn't make any big changes this year. He stays in Aquarius for the entire year, moving in the middle degrees, if you will, of Aquarius. So no big hoo-has that I came across. I mean, usual Saturn stuff, right? Rebuilding, reforming, making the foundation, all of that, setting up a foundation for the future, certainly, that's sustainable, that's preservable, that's worth having, but no big astrological brouhahas like we've had this year. We still have the continuation a bit of the Saturn Uranus square. We have one more time where that is going to play out, but it isn't in the same tempo or tenor that it's been in 2021. The next big shift that we go into happens around the 18th of January, depending on your time zone. It might be the 18th or the 19th. And that's when the nodes of the moon shift from the Gemini Sagittarius axis, where they've been for the last 18 months, into the Taurus Scorpio axis, where they will be for the next 18 months. I think it's until July of 2023. So let's talk about that, because I think a lot of the negativity that is coming up, the potential negative expression for 2022, comes from this nodal shift. And that's because Scorpio is where the South Node will be. And the South Node, tricky, right? It takes us to the past. It takes us to the things that have happened in the past that we're holding on to, that we need to release, that we need to move beyond. And it causes us to have to talk about the things that we don't want to talk about, right? So the shame in our collective histories, or in the US, we've been struggling with this idea of race, right? Racial bias and all of that. In Scorpio, we have to look at the damage that we've done to each other, the damage that continues to be done to each other in that. So we have the bigger perspective of these things that we might not want to look at, but we have to look at them. We have to, right? The South Node demands that we release karma. And of all the signs, Scorpio has a lot of karma attached to it, right? It has the potential to release a ton of karma, but it also has the potential to have us wanting to not look at the very things that we need to take care of, that we need to move through. They're emotional, they're intense, they're deep. It's matters of things that we don't want to look at. So, sexuality, a part of that, and sex crimes, and how we've treated women, sex trafficking, and all of these dirty, seedy things, right, that are coming up for us to look at. So if there is a negative energy that might pop up, it's going to be any place where you're pushing down, or we collectively are pushing down the things that we need to be bringing to the light. So wherever we are not willing to go, wherever we're not willing to go, are the things that are going to be biting us in the you-know-where, right? Or stabbing us in the back with the scorpion sting.
Now, Janet, our mutual friend Londa has made the comment, this feels a bit intense. And it does, doesn't it? However, some of these things have started to come to the surface already.
Yes, they have. So it's a process. It's intense. But here's where I didn't want to leave you with just that, right? Because there's always an antidote, right? There's an antidote. It's called the North Node. And the antidote, the North Node, is in Taurus. And Taurus is about the simple things in life. We'll give you an example, right? So you have a friend or you have a family member and you get into an argument and you say things, these Scorpio things, right? You say things that are ugly or mean. And your friend can come back at you, or your friend or your family member can come back at you with Scorpio stinging. And start throwing your own BS at you, start calling you names and doing that. But the simplest and most beautiful way would be for that person receiving that to go, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I never looked at it from your point of view. Can we have a conversation about this? Can we heal this? Can we heal this grievance? If you've been holding that for a long time, and I'm so sorry that I've done this, or however it is that you can approach the issue from the heart and not from the stinger, right? So that we have a high potential simplification, right? Taurus loves simplifying. We have a very complex society, and we think that everything that we need to do is complex. But what if the simple solution to our food supply is or to hunger, is to make sure that food gets distributed everywhere as freely as possible, as simply as possible. What if we created, community gardens, which we do, but using ideas like community gardens, or places where people who can't afford to maybe buy some of the more expensive things can go. I don't know. I'm just saying, we got to look at the simplest thing is to, if we're dealing with hunger, is to feed people. Simplest thing, right? Feed them. We don't have to make it complex by about who's going to pay for it or how's it going to get distributed or blah, blah, blah. Those are things that will come naturally when the heart leads, right? When the heart leads, amazing things can happen, right? Amazing ideas and inspiration can occur. But if we get caught up in the details and trying to make this all very complex, then we're going to create more problems, right? That need to be solved. And Taurus also very sensual. It is ruled by the planet Venus, which loves harmony. It loves to be in the earth and in nature. I would say that nature is going to be our saving grace, assuming that we save nature, right?
Right.
That for the next 18 months, when you are all keyed up from the intensity of some kind of interaction or a family problem or a community problem, get outside, go to the beach, go to the park, go to the forest, go play with the animals or play with your own animals, play with children, do those kinds of things because it's going to simplify life. Things are going to be much more peaceful. Taurus by nature is more peaceful, right? Scorpio, it's not that Scorpio isn't peaceful, but Scorpio is holding the karma. And the karma can be released in the simplest of ways. I'm sorry. I'm grateful for you. Thank you. I forgive.
Yes, Londa has mentioned Ho'oponopono.
I love it. Great idea. We should teach that to everybody.
Absolutely. And for those who are unaware of that, an Hawaiian doctor sat at his he was involved in a mental institution, I think. Anyway, he would sit at his desk every day and say, and I sometimes get the order wrong because I tend to say it the way I like it. I love you. I'm sorry. But please forgive me. I love you. I've messed it up, but it's something like that, and you can certainly source it via Google.
Yeah, and I bet Londa can probably type it out real quick there in the chat for everybody or someone.
Yes. Now Londa has a question for you. Anaya, first of all, said the way of the heart is the answer to all. Absolutely, which is that reiterates what you said, Janet.
Yeah.
And Londa's saying, how's Neptune affecting us now? There's water everywhere.
Yeah, she would know all about that because her poor property has been inundated. We have been in flood situations off and on for, I think, the whole last 2 weeks or so. Well, the interesting thing to answer your question, Londa, is that Jupiter is going to connect to Neptune in Pisces in April or March 23rd. And so this was actually my next thing. So you're so psychic, girl. So Jupiter is actually moving into Pisces at the end of this month. He gave us a foreshadowing of Pisces energy back in May 13th through July 28th. So this year. And if you can go back into your memories about what was going on in those 2 months period, the seeds were sown then for what Jupiter in Pisces and ultimately Jupiter connecting to Neptune in Pisces would be bringing us. And I think the biggest connection here is going to be the emotional sensitivity, the volatility of emotional energy, the seeming inability that we have sometimes to master our own emotions. And instead of responding to things that are showing up, we react, right? We break down, we scream, we cry, we hit, we, burn down the village kind of thing in a reaction to an emotional reaction to things that are happening. Well, Jupiter is a co-ruler of Piscean energy. So we have a planet that brings optimism and can restore us to a bigger vision of ourselves or of the world, to help us kind of engender the philosophy of love and faith and growth. and coming to roost, in a sign that's very much imaginative, creative, sensitive, psychic. So I feel like that right now, even though the emotions are pretty ragged, right? I think there's a lot of emotional raggedness. I have a feeling that Jupiter moving here is going to help us to see a path of emotional intelligence. And I think you're going to hear a lot of people start to talk about this, not just, I talk about it a lot in the context of human design, but I feel like you're going to start to hear about it more and more as we start to teach people how to respond to emotional things as opposed to reacting to them, which gives us the power of choice again. Again, we're going back to this power of choice to choose what it is that we want to have happen. So it may not be easy. It's not going to be easy because not everybody gets this yet, right? Not everybody gets the idea of I'm responsible for my own reactions. Because they're still blaming, they're still shaming, they're still guilt tripping, and they're still looking outside of themselves for answers. So it's going to be incumbent upon all of us, I think, to teach others by example. So even if we are triggered by the scorpion sting of somebody's, words or actions at us, that we take that in a way that is going to be able to be responded to. Like, I can see that you're very upset by this. And maybe now is not the best time for us to talk about this, but I'm open to a conversation where we can find a solution. Many different things that we can do so that the emotional reaction is down, right? It's responding, not reacting.
Yes.
And I know that's going to be possible, but I also know that Jupiter has the tendency to magnify and expand things. So if there is an emotional outburst or an emotional trigger, things can get overblown very easy. So I feel like we're going to be having to learn how to modulate our reactions and teach our children, our friends, our family to be responsible for their own emotions, for their own emotional response, their own emotional health, their own emotional intelligence. And I think that's, again, one of those things that's a process. It doesn't happen overnight.
No, it's something that, yes, we can work towards, because it's one thing to acknowledge feelings, emotions such as anger, and it's then how do we channel that in a positive way. I was only talking to my son about that this morning, and because yes, we can rant and rave. The thing is, we're upsetting ourselves. So how is it? And I love I statements because we all have the right and the ability to use I statements. And I also like your suggestion, Janet, of saying, now mightn't be the best time. Let's discuss
table
this
this
later.
for the moment.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
So
yes, and everybody can do this. This is not hard stuff. I think the hardest part is having the will to do this, right? Rather than resorting to the old way, which is to bring out that scorpion stinger and turn it into a bazooka, right? And turn it, into something that goes straight to the heart and hurts, right? It hurts people. So I guess in a way, it also brings more heart into everything that we do and everything we feel. The other thing I want to say about that is that during this period of time, these first 4 months or so of 2022, we have a lot of sensitivity energy. So we could be very wise about what people are feeling, or about what things to say or not say, or about what things to do, about where to go, about who to contact, because we all have that intuitive psychic ability. We all carry it. And it's just going to be enhanced by Jupiter's move through the sign of Pisces. Now, along with that is, the more creative, imaginative energy. I feel like we need to all sing John Lennon's song, Imagine, right? It needs to be the core song for 2022.
Absolutely.
What would happen if we could imagine peace and more then what if we could imagine peace and bring it into reality? Because nothing starts in the reality. Everything begins in the imaginal world, in the creative realm. So if we can imagine war, we sure as well can imagine peace. If we can imagine hate, we can sure as heck imagine love. We just have to focus at a different end of the spectrum of energies. And we can do it. We can do this. But we're also going to be more psychically aware too. So there may be a lot of people awakening. I'm seeing it in my family. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you, Annette. It's so amazing. A son-in-law just the other day breaks out and says, I want to learn more about being a healer. I was like,
fantastic.
And he doesn't mean doctor, right? He doesn't mean, he means, I want to be able to do what some of these metaphysical people out here are doing. I went, wow, I would never have imagined, but I must have imagined because it's happening. So people are awakening in droves, the younger people, especially the 1980s, 1990s, and the 2000s, those three generations. Boom. They came awakened. They came already with that awakened gene, and they're just now, boom, coming out and, emerging in very big ways. And, it's up to all of us that were born in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s, even the 40s, to support them, because they're the ones we're turning this planet over to. We're looking to them now to lead us into what we knew could be. So we have a lot of good stuff there.
Absolutely. Now, I would like to say the comment about, and I have to find it again, the way of the heart is the answer to all. That was to Beth's comment. And Belinda has one too, where she says that when we speak from the heart, the message we are giving is received in the heart and with less sting, she feels.
Right.
So,
right. Good one.
It is about how we treat ourselves, how we treat each other. And Londa makes the comment, I've heard that the energies coming up, place all eyes on the US as how we respond here.
God help us. Yep, it does. God help the world.
It's rising up everywhere. And it's simply, as we said, the old paradigms are being done away with. And there are new ways of living when we do treat each other with love. I mean, I often think that gorgeous song, Imagine, by John Lennon. Yes, Imagine. And he wrote that so many decades ago.
Right. And it still gives me chills when I listen to that song about what could be if we could imagine.
Yes.
Instead of imagining all of the ugliness, imagine the beauty, imagine the peace, imagine the love. So we do have that ability. And to your point, Londa, the USA is experiencing a Pluto return very early in 2022, starting in February, and we'll have a 3-pass. Yay for us, right? A 3-pass, which means Pluto is returning across in forward motion, then turns retrograde and goes back over it again, and then turns back to forward motion and goes over it one more time, just in case we hadn't learned the lesson. Or made the changes. Remember that Pluto is about death and rebirth. It's about transformation. It takes us on a journey through the underworld and coming out at the other side. And when you look at what's been going on in the USA over the last several years, we have been in the underworld, right? We are looking at the potential for how do we want to imagine ourselves as leaders in the world, as an important economy, as an important, not that any of the, God, that sounds so egocentric, but all economies are available and worthwhile. but we have a very large economy. And so what we do does have a tendency to affect others. What if we decided that Australia has some really good ideas and we're big enough to follow their lead? Wow.
Whoa.
Right? What if we looked at a little place like Iceland, who has some really interesting banking laws and some, or even was it Finland's education laws and things like that? What if we went the way of the smaller countries, simplifying, right? There's a simplifying there. What if we said, hey, you guys got it going?
Yes.
I don't know that can happen, but
well, anything can happen. Let's dream big.
Right? We might as well dream big. And here's the thing. Jupiter, to go back to what Londa was asking about Jupiter's conjunction to Neptune, is that we need to dream the biggest dream possible.
Yes.
The biggest dream possible. Becoming aware of what's really important. What's really important? If we're going to dream a dream for the future, what's the most important dream? Right? I feel like sometimes here in the US, but I also think, China and Russia does somewhat the same thing. We look at where can we go next? Like go to Mars, build a base on the moon. What's next? Go to whatever, right? Fill in the blank. Instead of doing what we need to do to work this planet.
Yes.
We're actually on this planet, right? We live here. Our feet are here on the ground here. Are we giving up this planet? We've messed up our own backyard, so we're just going to go find something else to mess up. To me, that's so short-sighted. So I feel like Jupiter in a conjunction with Neptune is asking us to see the bigger picture, to really embrace the imaginal, and not fall prey to the biggest illusion ever. Right? Because there's always the Neptune illusion. So you add Jupiter's, so you either get the biggest vision of, visionary beauty, or you can get the biggest illusion that we fall prey to disillusionment. But I think it belongs in our own choice, right? We can create an alternate reality.
Yes.
Alternate reality will probably play a big role as we move future-wise here too. Even over the weekend at Thanksgiving, one of my step-grandkids got this thing called a Oculus. And you wear it, you put it on your head, and inside you're watching this game, or this whole virtual reality going on. I rode a roller coaster in the Oculus, and it felt to me like I was really on it.
Wow.
So this alternate reality is pretty darn real.
Yes.
It feels real. It feels so real. So we've got to watch ourselves there too, because are we leading ourselves down a road of escapism, right? That's a Neptune theme.
Well,
so we don't want to escape by running off to Mars and focusing our energy on Mars, when we could focus our energy here and, heal some things here. And I feel like that's a part of the USA Pluto return as well, right?
Tom has a little comment, Janet, about that. With all due respect, the USA needs some ego deflation, and now it's happening.
I don't know what I would say in response to that, but I feel like it is a bit of a comeuppance. And, in many different ways. But I feel like when that happens, it levels the playing field again, and we get to see ourselves in more real ways, right? The reality is the country is made up by the individuals. It isn't the government, right? It isn't the politics. It isn't the economy. It's the people. Yes. And as we start to build more grassroots sort of movements in the country, I think you're going to see the love and the light of the people. And that not just in the USA, I think that happens all around the world, but because the USA is the only country now in a Pluto return, we're going to be watched, for lack of a better word. So people will be watching the way that the US goes might be the way that the rest of the world goes.
Yes. Well, the US has been considered a leader for a long, long time. So, yeah, interesting. Now, Pauline has a couple of comments. Cosmic rays giving codes to wake up and remember. And more women have more interest in astrology, like more men. But more professional astrologers are they men? So I'm not sure about that.
I think I understand what she's saying, that there are more male voices in the astrology world than there are female voices. And I think that's probably shifting as well, because the dynamic, more women are getting their voices heard, right? We're stepping up. We want to be heard. So I think that continues. There's nothing different there. I think that one of the big things that's going to happen, and this is hard to explain in a podcast format like this. If I thought I would have done a graphic, but I didn't. But as we move through the year, especially as we get to April, what we see is the major outer planets are all lined up in subsequent signs. We'll have Jupiter in Aries, Uranus in Taurus. First, let me go back. We'll have Pluto in Capricorn, Saturn in Aquarius, Neptune in Pisces, Jupiter in Aries, and Uranus in Taurus.
Wow.
So we have them lined up in signs that are neighboring one another. They create semi-sextiles with one another, or sextiles. So like Pluto and Neptune would be in a sextile. Pluto and Saturn would be in a semi-sextile. What that means for us is that there are many different voices and many different intentions that are out there. Those planets out there like that are driving our collective, right? So there's no clear majority out there. You can't say, oh, all these, like, at the beginning of 2020, when we had Pluto, Jupiter, Pallas Athena, Mercury, and Venus all in Capricorn, there was a clear majority there, right? There was a clear majority, and it was all about destruction of systems and the potential to rebuild systems. But we don't have that coming into this year. We have this sort of diffused or diverse sort of energy that creates the need for us to have to cooperate in order to get anything done. And so have we really been very good at cooperation over the past few years? Not so much. So I think one of the opportunities that the US has is to heal the breach in the division and the polarization that we've been involved with. Because if we can do it in the midst of all the hot polarity that we've been in, then it's possible for everyone around the world. Right. But because people will be watching, because I'm not the only voice out there saying that the USA is having a Pluto return, we could pick up this drumbeat of creating a way to cooperate in order to go forward, to move on. Right. So there's a new way out there. That's not hierarchical. That's not us looking at, this country is better than this country is better than this country. We've got to get away from that third world sort of feeling. I don't know that we use that very often anymore, but we still think it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
We still are thinking about that.
Yeah. And we can be hierarchical too in how we see people. And yet we know basically we are all one. And as you say, yes, there are lots of different countries. However, we are all living on this planet together. And the sooner that we unite and can see the positives that everyone has to share. So it really is a shift in our attitudes, isn't it?
Oh, big shift. And, we need to take every opportunity to shift it to the positive, to the loving, to the heart-centered. because, you know, the next 2 years, 2023, 2024, and even into 2025, we still have some difficult transits ahead of us. Pluto changes and moves out of Capricorn in 2024 for a brief time, and then in 2025 moves into Aquarius. So we're thrust into a major transformation when Pluto moves from one sign to the other. When Pluto first moved into Capricorn, we had an economic meltdown, that a depression for all intents and purposes, or a recession that was global. It wasn't just the US, but it was like every factor. And what's it going to be then? It's hard to say, but if we don't start to take steps to imagine something different, then do we get caught with our pants down again, or with our shorts, you know, in a knot, getting, you know, always behind the 8 ball, as it were, trying to, you know, solve a problem instead of focusing on solutions when we knew the potential of a problem, that we're behind, you know, the curve, like we are in this pandemic, right? We've been like, I'm watching a show on Netflix. No, I don't know where it is. Hulu or something, called The Hot Zone. It's a National Geographic show. And they're not looking at this pandemic, but they were looking at Ebola and then anthrax. And how we knew the potential for a global pandemic existed. And we had people that knew that we should have a plan. But what happened is all of these different organizations, all of these different government agencies begin infighting about who's going to have power, who's going to have the control. And so they don't have any clear-cut path forward. So then what happens is COVID, right? And we don't have a plan, because nobody can fix the who's in power, who's in charge, who are we going to listen to, right? Are we going to listen to the scientists? Are we going to listen to the government? We have to shake ourselves out of that, because there are bigger problems potentially on the horizon. and if you know, dare I say, right, we're shooting ourselves in the foot by not learning how to work together in a more profoundly cooperative way. So I think that's the biggest opportunity we have as we start to move into this next year, is can we start a conversation about cooperation between nations, between groups, between people in general.
Absolutely. Is that a word for next year, Janet? Cooperation.
Yeah, I have another good one for next year too, Renaissance. I've already seen that start to pop up in news feeds. But when I say Renaissance, I know
I say that Renaissance. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's the idea, like there was the Renaissance period of time that came after the Dark Ages, right? Out of the Dark Ages, what brought us out of the Dark Ages was the Renaissance, right? Where there was this explosion in art and science and understanding how the world worked. And I feel like we're on that verge, right? I feel we're right there. And it doesn't have to be a 400-year Dark Ages and then, you know, a 200-year or 400-year Renaissance. I feel like we can birth it ourselves if we only had the will to do it, to see that we can bring in that golden age. That it's a choice.
Let's choice. Bring it on.
Right? And moving into the air age, you know, now as we started back at the beginning of the show here, it's all potential, right? Because there are ideas there, that the untried ideas, the things that we've left on the table, that, you know, we thought we could never, you know, do, but
we're doing it.
Right. It all begins in the imagination, and what we can imagine, we can create. And what we create can be life altering, can be planet changing, can be universally changing everything. So,
yes. Now, Ursula, who started our show, says that Renaissance, when the darkest light is met with the most amazing light.
Right. And don't you think that every one of us carries the most amazing light?
Indeed.
Right. You are made up of light. Use your light in a positive, powerful way to bring positive change to the world. And
yes.
the dark balances out there, not to say that we don't want the dark, because it's in the dark of the womb that a child grows, right? It's in the dark when we sometimes have the most creative inspiration. So I don't mean to say that we only want the light. What I think I'm saying when I say about the light is that bring out the love, right? The love energy. So,
which is wonderful as we're leading up to Christmas, especially. Let's share love, love, love. All of those wonderful songs about love.
Right.
Janet.
All you need is love.
Exactly. Thank you for 2021. And our show heads off my 2022. So I will be back with you, Janet. The next time I'm with you is the first week in February. So we will have started well and truly a month down into 2022.
Oh, I'm sure I'll have some fun stuff going on then I can talk about.
Yes, I'm sure you will too.
Thank you so much, Annette. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And we've done this for a couple of years now, right? A few years.
A few years indeed. And I'm delighted to think that it's going to continue in 2022.
Right.
So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And to my listeners, my watchers, there are 2 weeks still to come. Next week, I'm going to be with Tibet. And so now that's very interesting that I said Tibet, because it won't be Tibet. It will be. That's a faux pas. Next week, I will be with Marnie Perner. And then the week after, the final show for 2021 will be Rosemary Butterworth and the delightful Robbie Holtz from the
love
US.
Robbie.
Isn't she gorgeous? Absolutely.
I don't know Rosemary, but I'm sure she's beautiful too.
Yes. We're very fortunate here on Angel Heart Radio. We have delightful people, and our audience is delightful too. So thank you all for being with us. And Janet, may you have a delightful end to 2021.
Thank you.
A very exciting, peaceful, and easily flowing beginning to 2022.
I'm going to Disneyland.
Oh!
Christmas Day to January 3rd.
Fantastic. Well, you have a ball.
Thank you.
And may our audience, no matter what you're doing for the rest of today into tomorrow, make sure that you love yourself and you spread the love and have fun. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
For this year's holiday break, there will be wonderful programs that we're going to replay for you on our Angel Heart Radio Facebook page to see you through the holiday season. There will be plenty to inspire you, plenty to support you, and plenty to remind you of just how many wonderful reasons there really truly are, regardless of how it looks on the outside, for gratitude and abundance. So do keep in touch with us on our Angel Heart Radio Facebook page, and we will all be back with our live programs early in 2022. And Anaya, that's me, I'll be popping up on Facebook with some pop-ups along the way, so keep an eye open. I'd also like to take this opportunity to wish you happy holidays. And if you're finding these holidays particularly difficult, again, we're here to support you. Thank you so much for your support throughout 2021, which marked 10 years for us. Wow, 10 whole years of bringing you Angel Heart Radio. There's more to come, more to be excited about, and so much more to be inspired by and grateful for. Thank you for your support. We care about you and we're here for you.
You've been listening to another fabulous program on Angel Heart Radio. Our goal is to remind you of how much you matter in the world and to let you know that we appreciate who you are in the world. Angel Heart Radio programs are powerful tools. They are not intended, nor should they, be used to replace your medical or legal advice. The views and opinions expressed by Angel Heart Radio hosts, guests, co-hosts and associates should not be construed as advice from Angel Heart Radio.